Hi, everyone. Welcome to OMD's webinar, Greening K-12 Schools, How to Talk to Food Service Directors. Can everyone hear me? If you can hear me, please type yes in the chat box and announce where you're coming from. Let's see, we have Ellie from New York and Dylan from Santa Fe joining us. Oh, wow, we have Melissa from Dublin, California, Chicago, Burbank, California. All right, we have Rebecca in Atlanta, Georgia, from our partners at HSUS Forward Food. Tara from Mount Shasta, Paul from Rochester, Minnesota, and Val from Minneapolis all here. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give a few more minutes for people to call in or join us. So we'll be starting in just a minute or two, but thank you. Just a reminder that this webinar will break down the basics of how to approach K-12 school administrators and how to ask for more healthy, climate-friendly, plant-based options in cafeterias. Again, if you are just hopping on, please announce yourself and where you're coming from. Oh, we have Mike from Denman Island, BC joining us too. Great, thank you all. Before I get started, I just want to welcome and acknowledge everyone who's joining us. We have teachers and parents on the call, and we also have people who don't have kids. We have folks on the call who are lifelong vegetarians or vegans and folks who are meat eaters. We have folks who might consider yourselves activists and folks who are just getting started learning. And we welcome all of you. We really want to get to know each person who dialed in, and we respect that we're each in a very different place, and we're curious just to learn more about you and your story. So thank you again for joining us. And if you hopped on while I was talking, go ahead and just announce yourself in the box. And let us know where you're all calling in from. Okay, great. We're just going to give it a few more minutes for a few of the latecomers to join us. How about everybody telling us one of their favorite fruits or vegetables while we're waiting as well? I'll go first. My favorite vegetable is eggplants. I know it can be considered a fruit as well, but I love it because you can do so many fun things with it. Okay, we got Rebecca with kale. That's a popular one amongst healthy eaters. Bananas, Paul loves bananas. Dylan loves yellow peppers. Ooh, sweet potato. That's a great one, Michelle. Andrea, sweet peas. They're great. I just had them last night for dinner. Mike with dates. Ooh, what a great natural sweetener. Valeria, avocado. Who doesn't love avocado? And Scully, roasted cauliflower. I've had some great roasted cauliflower tacos lately. And Emily with winter squash, something a little seasonal. Yeah, delicious. Thanks, all. We're just going to take Jessica. It is so hard to choose, isn't it? So many beautiful vegetables out there. Again, I just wanted to let everyone know I'm so happy you could all join us today. My name is Renee, and I'll be your host. Again, to remind everyone, this webinar is going to break down the basics of how to approach K-12 school administrators and ask for more healthy, climate-friendly, plant-based options in cafeterias. So let's get going. As I mentioned, I'll be your host today, and joining me later are two people who are campaigning for healthier lunches in schools. So today you'll be hearing, aside from hearing from me, you'll also be hearing from Michael Walsh, who is a parent in the New York City School District, and he's been working with his daughter's school to get healthier, greener options in her cafeteria. And later, we'll also be hearing from Andrea Jacobson, who is the advocacy manager at Balanced. And together with Balanced, she's been working with schools across the country to get healthier, climate-friendly options on school lunch menus everywhere. And just a reminder that for the first part of our webinar, you'll be able to talk to us in the chat tool. Feel free to make any comments or tell us how excited you are, or just anything you want to say to us. But after that, we'll be switching to the Q&A chat tool, where later in the webinar, you'll be able to ask Andrea and I questions about talking to school officials. So go ahead and take a look at your menu bar and make sure you're well acquainted with the chat box that we're using right now and the Q&A tool that we'll be using a little bit later in this webinar. Hi, thank you, Michelle. No, I don't believe we'll be at CACFP in Chicago next week, but shoot me an email and I'd love to talk to you about it later. Again, for anyone who needs my email, I'm going to drop it here in the chat box, just in case anyone wants to talk to me or has anything they want to say later. Okay, great. So going through the agenda, today we're going to start off with a quick overview of our K-12 school lunch campaign, and then I'll share a few tips on how to get started. Then Michael will share his experience working with school officials, and then Andrea from Balance will discuss her work reaching out to schools as well. After this, Andrea and I want to hear from you, and you'll be able to ask questions via the Q&A tool. And for anyone who's new to OMD, I just want to talk a little bit about what OMD is. Our goal is to support people just like you to change their relationship with food by swapping at least one meal a day with something plant-based. We're just asking people to dedicate one meal a day to the planet and to their health. We know that what's on our plates impacts our health and the health of the planet. And from heart disease to climate change, there's no shortage of research and science that shows us how devastating meat and dairy is for our bodies and the earth. But OMD is also about expanding access and making a great case for schools, businesses, restaurants, and communities to move towards more plant-based options. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, my name is Renee, and I'm the engagement manager at OMD. I'm based out of Southern California, where I visited public schools all over the region to talk about greening school lunches and other plant-based initiatives. One of the schools I visited back in 2012, Roosevelt High School in East Los Angeles, took part in the LAUSD's pilot implementation of plant-based lunches 5 years later in 2017. Now I work with individuals around the country to get their local food institutions to add healthy, climate-friendly, plant-based entrees to their menus. So feel free to reach out to me to ask about OMD, our toolkits, plant-based eating, or if you just want to say hi. Speaking of our toolkits, has everyone had the chance to download the School Lunch for Change toolkit? I'll be referencing it throughout the webinar, so it's really helpful to have on hand. Okay, so let's get ready to get going. And just, thank you, Melissa. I love your enthusiasm. Oh, Mike still needs the toolkit. We'll see about getting a toolkit sent over then to you, Mike. All right, just a reminder to everyone that we're going to be moving from the chat box to the Q&A box at this point. So if you have any questions moving forward, go ahead and ask any questions in the Q&A box down in the menu. And thank you, Jessica from OMD has shared the toolkit in the chat box for anybody who needs it. So let's get started. Why are we asking for plant-based foods in schools? Schools encompass such a large population that serving a vegetarian or a plant-based meal once a week or once a month can impact the environment, student health, and school food finances. Nearly 100,000 schools serve lunches to nearly 31 million students in the United States every single day. These numbers are huge. If you look at some data from our partners at the Chef Ann Foundation, in the 2015-2016 school year, over 5 billion school lunches were served in total. That's huge. And imagine the impact that could have if, even just a quarter of those lunches were plant-based. That'd be almost a billion plant-based lunches served. That'd be major. But out of those 5 billion lunches, the majority of the children are not receiving the daily recommended levels of fruits and vegetables by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Instead, they're often fed meals with far too much sugar, fat, and processed foods. For example, I pulled a recent school lunch menu from a cafeteria here in Southern California, and this is just kind of a 3-day sample about in terms of what the kids are eating. If you look, it's a lot of fried foods, it's a lot of greasy foods, it's a lot of also fast foods like Pizza Hut or Green Burrito, a lot of processed foods that aren't necessarily the healthiest for kids. But you can make a difference, and this is where you come in. Plant-based diets are full of vegetables, fruits, legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds, and are free of meat, dairy, and eggs. Healthy, climate-friendly food service achieves a lower carbon and water footprint than traditional food service by offering a wider array of plant-based and plant-forward foods. We know that school lunch programs can be complicated. Food service directors are hard-pressed to serve healthy food while working within tight budgets, with minimal staff and under-resourced facilities, all while complying with USDA guidelines and trying to please student palates, which we all know, anybody who has tried to feed little kids, that they can be a little picky sometimes and it can be a little difficult. But again, there are parents around the country who have been making these changes and working really hard to get healthier, climate-friendly foods on school lunch menus. So this is where you come in. And here's our ask. Our ask is for schools to offer at least one healthy, plant-based entree and drink option daily. Okay, so let's talk about where folks just like you have been winning changes all over the country and getting healthier, climate-friendly school food lunches in their cafeterias. These are all headlines from the past year. In New York, the 62 New York school districts adopted a 10-day vegan challenge. In Miami-Dade County, they expanded their vegan options. And San Francisco Unified School District did a vegan pilot program, and they said that their offerings were also a success. And right now in California, we have a new bill that was proposed to fight climate change and improve students' health by incentivizing schools to serve more plant-based meals. So parents like you are working, people and parents like you are working all across the country to change what schools serve for lunch, and they are winning. So we can win if we do this together. So how do we do this? Well, as discussed in our School Lunch for Change Toolkit, we have 6 steps to get you started. The first step is teaming up and having strength in numbers. So it's very important to recruit friends, students, parents, school board members, and teachers. Try to start with finding 1 or 2 people from your school community or school district to get on board. Let's see, does anybody have any examples, or you can mention this in the question box. Does anybody have any examples of how they've started reaching out to community members in their own school districts about teaming up and getting people together to talk about healthier plant-based options? And if you're a little shy right now, feel free to email me about any stories you want to share or questions about gathering a team together. Okay, so step 2. Step 2 is understanding your school district's kitchens. A good place to start is checking out the current menu at your local school. For example, have they tried Meatless Mondays? Are there any plant-based options already being offered? Are there items that could be easily swapped out or upgraded? Is it possible for you to join students for a meal to get a better understanding of what's being served and what the students like? If you can, try to go into your kids' school and sit with them and see what the meals are and how kids are reacting. And this is how you can start to develop a relationship with school officials, and they can get to know you once they start seeing you around campus more. And a special note about school administrators. It's important to develop a positive working relationship with the school and the district administration. A few questions that you might want to look into. Does a school have somebody who is primarily responsible for student wellness or who has spearheaded change to improve school or student wellness? It's very important to identify one person who can act as a liaison for the rest of the administration and communicate information from your group to the school. Great, yeah, let's hear some of people's responses about how they've been able to start their own groups. So let's see, we've got Rebecca Portman, who's been working with a parent at Atlanta Public Schools who got invited to the Wellness Committee meeting. She's been working with the food service director ever since. It was a great way to get into the school and begin her relationships with the food and nutrition department. That's terrific, Rebecca. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And also in the chat box, we have shared 2 stories of plant-powered food service directors. So go ahead and you can read a little bit more there about 2 individuals who have made changes in their schools. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about food service directors. Why are food service directors so important? Food service directors play a critical role in the implementation of the revised school meal standards. Your school or district's food service director will be able to provide insight into existing school food resources, facilities, policies, and practices. The food service director can also inform you of past and current efforts to improve school food. It's important to remember, however, that the food service director position is extremely demanding. They must address a spectrum of needs while being responsible for food service at all of the district schools, and also must field questions and concerns from individuals throughout the district. To find out who your food service director is, you can check the school's website or call the front office to see who you should talk to. Then you can contact them for a phone call or a meeting. And if you're not sure about where to start or what to say to your food service director, in the OMD School Lunch Toolkit, we have a special template letter just for food service directors that you can use to request the meeting. The template letter has reasons to give the school in terms of why you want to add a plant-based option. It's a great resource. Feel free to use it and change it as you see fit. But before you meet with the school director, remember, it's so important to gather supporting information. Prepare your argument, do your research, and if you have any questions beforehand, feel free to reach out to me at One Meal a Day for the Planet or any of our partners at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, the Chef Anne Foundation, Friends of the Earth, or Balance for more information. OMD has toolkits with plenty of resources, and there are many people at our partner organizations that are working on these campaigns also, so we are all happy to help you and guide you through this process. Later in this presentation, you'll be able to ask experts exactly all of your questions. So towards the end of this, you'll be able to ask all of your questions. Sure, let's see. We've got Melissa. I'm just going to share a few of these statements from people who are on. Let's see, we've got Scully saying that it's helped to establish a health and wellness club at your school, and this way you can get more numbers involved. They started that at Malibu High. Scully, that's a great idea, starting a club with like-minded people who are also interested in health and wellness. That's terrific. Melissa, she has also been serving on her school district's wellness committee, and she's been in touch and working with the school's food service director ever since. And Tara is saying they've been working on this for a few years, and recently the school district has agreed to stop having heat and serve shipped from a different city, and they're going to install their own salad bar. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing those responses. Terrific. And let's move forward a little bit with our next session. Let's hear from We're going to hear from Michael Walsh in New York City. his daughter, he has been working with his daughter's school to bring healthier, climate-friendly options to her school. And Michael is here to share about his relationship with the school and how he's been working with them over the past few years. Go ahead and take it away, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Hello? Hi there. So my daughters attend public school PS11 in New York City, and we live in Manhattan, and that's where our school is. And we have done a lot of things. We have gardens on site where we grow. We have a short growing season because we're in New York City, so it's kind of May to June and then September to October. So we focus a lot on herbs and some lettuces and things like that. And we've introduced them. We have a salad bar already, which is kind of more of a standard institutional one, but we have had special days where the student council will work the salad bar to promote, to try to have the older kids promote the younger kids trying different things. We've had volunteers teach outside of our school. So they'll set up a little table in front of the school when people are coming for drop off and hand out little samples of things, often from the school garden for people to sample. So those are a couple of things we've done on school. Another big program we have is we have our own farmers market. There is a program that we refer to as a CSA. It's a community supported agriculture, where we contract with a organic farm in the Hudson Valley that they come into the city once a week, and members of the CSA get a delivery of fresh grown organic vegetables. So we have a group at school. They basically purchase in bulk from this farm, and then we resell it in front of the school. And it's a project for our third graders. So every week a different group of third graders goes out and sells the vegetables. So that is a hands-on experience for them. They also all take a field trip to see the farm. So I think that has been a wonderful partnership that we've done, that kind of exposes them, whether they even try it, at least, they're holding and looking at some vegetables that they probably have never seen before and would have never encountered, and hopefully will be encouraged to try them. Those are kind of the three big projects that we've done. We've done a lot of little things. One that's kind of important that I think is one of the most broad-based is that we replaced the cooking oil in our school kitchen with olive oil to get away from the kind of institutional vegetable oil that is provided by the Department of Education in New York City. So we started that with a partnership with a local grocery store that supplied us for a while. And I believe over time we had two different suppliers who were donating it, but those contracts ultimately ended up being unsustainable. So now the PTA just pays for it. We just kind of rolled the cost into our fundraising, and now we just go ahead and just purchase that. But I think reaching out to your community stores, I believe at one point Whole Foods was sponsoring that. So like, that's a great place. Places that already have that mission might be happy to partner with you, or at least meet you halfway in some way. So that's a great place to look around your community, what stores and companies might be willing to help you kind of take steps in greening your kitchen.
Thank you so much, Michael. I loved hearing about your story and the emphasis on building the community around getting these healthier changes at your local school, and kind of getting the kids involved in terms of learning more about where the food is coming from, and kind of seeing the whole approach and why this is being done. Not just, being served the food, but they're being added to the whole change. Thank you so much, Michael. We really appreciate you sharing your story. It's parents like you who are making these changes all over the country, and it's amazing. To also speak about some changes coming up, Our next guest is Andrea Jacobson, who is the Advocacy Manager at Balanced. And Andrea will discuss creative ways of working with school officials to get plant-based options in school cafeterias and around the country. And after Andrea speaks, you'll be able to ask her and I questions via the chat box. So thank you so much for joining us, Andrea, and go ahead and take it away.
Oh, great. I was just about to say, I was like, oh, I can't unmute my microphone there. Here, and I can start some video so you can see my face. Hey, everyone. Like Renee said, thank you, Renee, for introducing me. I am Andrea Jacobson, and I'm the Advocacy Manager at Balance, like she said. Also want to throw out another thank you to Michael. Really appreciate your inspiring story of how you're able to make so much change in your school in New York City. Such a great time, or such a great and important place to be doing this kind of advocacy work. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to run over a few things real quick just to further kind of flesh out a lot of the things that Renee was talking about, because we at Balanced also really feel it's very important to really approach food service directors from a place of empathy and understanding, because their jobs, they are responsible for so much. They're responsible for serving, all these meals to all these students, meeting federal guidelines for the jobs of the people who work for them in the food service department, for turning a profit. Which I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. So really just starting from a place of understanding and seeking to really get to know what their barriers are is really, really important. A lot of the barriers that you're going to run into kind of fall into like three categories. So there are like logistical barriers, there are regulatory barriers, and there are some financial barriers. And so first, there's the kind of, like the operational logistic barriers for folks. And that's things, like not having kitchens that are equipped for all this, for scratch cooking. And so it kind of depending, like she said, on those kind of heat and serve meals. And it can be a big challenge when schools can't find the vendors to offer more balanced or even plant-based options. Many schools obviously have larger student bodies, and so that can offer a lot of pressure to kind of please everyone and have a lot of different diverse options. And so, instead of serving those few really higher quality meals, they kind of overwhelm the students with options for the unhealthy things that they are more trained, their palates are more trained to enjoy. So for like the, niche vegetarian and vegans, the option tends to just be, like a packaged hummus and pita chips, or, one of those uncrustable peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Not the healthiest option, or really even very appetizing. So that's can be a real barrier as well. And as previously mentioned too, understaffing when it comes to some logistical problems. It's a really big concern, especially in larger school districts. We work with one school district in North Carolina who, their number one concern was just, staffing. They needed a lot of support from us, having the time to create recipes that would be more plant forward. So understanding that they just didn't have the time to kind of overcome, like they were so busy creating food day in and day out, they didn't have the time to step back and be creative and make those recipes. So that's an example of maybe one way that, really understanding those barriers creates an opportunity for parents and students and, concerned community members to really, get involved. Because that's, a recipe that's a pretty solvable problem for most folks. You can just think of some great entrees and that can be a real big support. Another category of barriers you might run into would be regulatory constraints. Obviously, school districts are receiving money from the USDA to purchase their some food commodities, and it rarely incentivizes wholesome foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, and it does obviously heavily subsidize the meat, poultry, dairy, and egg industries. And so it really incentivizes the purchase of those unhealthy products, which unfortunately are very highly palatable to children because the billions of dollars spent by the food industry to market foods to children every year are predominantly for, again, those meat, poultry, dairy, and egg products. The regulations that the USDA puts on those school meals are also a constant tug of war between the food industry and public health experts, as I'm sure you know. So, the USDA is this regulatory body that determines these school food mandates, but ultimately they are responsible to industry as well, which can, which works with the subsidy system that I just kind of mentioned about how they're really kind of pushing a lot of those products. And so, for us as a public health organization, we are concerned about regulations being too lax in many ways, such as the limits on saturated fat. And then we're also concerned about, in some ways, they're very strict to protect certain industries, such as requiring, cow's milk to be served at every meal, for there to be some sort of dairy product, especially like cheeses, which are, again, very, very high in saturated fats. And so in many ways, these regulations combine to create dependency on food companies, and it can be very challenging to adjust to new regulations, particularly for programs that aren't very well funded. And so it creates this, mental and logistical, hurdle that these food service departments really have to overcome in order to de-incentivize using these food company products that are very often processed kind of junk things that are full of sugar and sodium and oils, refined grains, all these things. And so all of this together, it really does constrain food service directors in a very, in the regulatory sense. They have to, fill all the, check all these boxes, fill all these requirements in order to get the money they need to keep their program afloat, which again, they are responsible for the jobs of the people they employ. And to be able to serve children some food at all and not have them be hungry. So it is something to definitely keep in mind. I'll just move quickly through the financial constraints. The third kind of category of restraints, again, it's as I've said, and as Renee has said, it's very common for these departments to be underfunded, understaffed, under-resourced. And so they really do have to turn a profit to keep themselves sustained. And so thinking again about how, is this food service department going to profit, they have to turn to the cheapest products they can, which are often, again, due to subsidies, animal products and things full of refined grains and sugars. And if they don't cater to those preferences of kids, which again are subject to all the billions of dollars of marketing, of these products to them, the kids will throw them out, or they won't purchase products from the food service at their school, and that means they lower profits, and that puts jobs in jeopardy. And so, it's really important to keep an eye on also fast food franchises and these food companies that are coming into schools. As our society, we really kind of value a recognizable brand, and kids, even at a young age, really value that as well. And so, it's an easy way for those food companies to access the children in that market. And they're really good at coming in at a really cheap price and making it affordable, which kind of for the food service department, which then is kind of like a guaranteed win for the food service director. That the kid is familiar with the brand, they're going to want to buy it, and it's an affordable product for them to sell. So there's a lot of kind of structural problems that you're going to face when having these conversations with food service directors. Those kind of three categories are the biggest ones that we've seen. And so it's natural to feel really frustrated because this, again, is a very structural problem which can feel overwhelming. And often you'll kind of feel that too in the attitude of a food service director. It's often that you'll kind of hear from them that they are kind of frustrated. And I think sometimes that frustration can really move towards a sense of apathy or complacency. And it can be, sometimes it can be a little bit of like a fallback response, to just kind of say, well, we have to generate profit. Well, we're tied by all these regulations. Well, we don't have the tools for for all those things. And so, it is important to understand all the regulations and all of the barriers they do face, and that doesn't make it impossible for them to make these changes, and it certainly doesn't mean that it's okay that that kids are being served things that we know are making them unhealthy, and definitely are hurting our climate as well. And so when we are working with parents who kind of face a lot of these obstacles in their school, we really focus on encouraging them to prove the demand for these healthier options with other parents and with the students who are being served by that school. One of the one of the tools that we offer at Balanced is kind of like a generic or a general baseline score of healthfulness. We use a balanced menu scorecard, and it grades the menus from A, B, C, D, and F. And that has been a really useful tool in terms of like making some sort of concrete measurement available to other parents and students at schools to really how healthy it is. Sometimes, you see a little green on a plate and you think, oh, well, it's got a vegetable on there, it must be healthy. But in many cases, a lot of larger school districts they score about a D or an F oftentimes on the health menu scorecard. And so that can be one way to rally people around your cause, is by really showing them the concrete evidence that, this has significant room for improvement, and that, children's health is really at stake in that way. We have another toolkit, of course, so I know One Meal a Day has a toolkit, we have one as well. And we have a stage of our toolkit that really focuses on what to do when you're told no. And so we talk a lot about, organizing other parents and students, speaking at PTA meetings, or presenting to a school board, passing out literature. We always kind of move forward with like a petition and a website approach to make the information really accessible for folks, to kind of learn more about the issue and understand why it's so important that the school district balance its menus and provide more plant-forward options than they already do. And so we have a lot of different steps and options we recommend. Like I said before, PTA meetings, and there's canvassing, passing out literature, all sorts of things. But the biggest, most important thing is to really work together in your community to show the demand is there, which can ultimately really show a food service director that they're not going to lose money on this venture. Like there can be a lot of hesitancy to move forward and to, cut ties with some of these corporate entities that, give them such good deals on things. But when you really show that the community is behind this ask, it can really make a big difference in helping them move forward. With all of that said, I know that there are some questions. I'm happy to keep talking, but I definitely want to leave time for all of the Q&A, because I know this is a lot of information thrown at you. Renee, can you give me a sense of okay, I guess it's time to move to the Q&A. Great.
Sure. Thank you for helping out with that segue, Andrea. Now it's time to ask an expert. We want to hear from all of you. What are your questions about talking to food service directors, school administration, other parents, community members? Let us know in the Q&A box, and Andrea, Michael, and I will try our best to answer all of your questions. And remember, we have Michael, the parent from New York City, who's been working with school districts out there too to answer some of your questions. So let's hear from you all. Okay, we have Scully asking, where is change most effective? Approaching the school district superintendent or your local principal, or both, to see change? That's a good one. Andrew or Michael, either of you want to weigh in on this one from your experiences?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. I guess I would say, looking at our school, the support of our principal is fundamental. Because he has a lot of say in what goes on in the building, And he also is a good conduit to, he understands on a certain level, he understands how the machinery works above him, which is the school district and the people that he reports to. So I would say if you had to choose, I think trying to foster relationships with all those people is your best course of action. But if you had to choose, I would say your principal, because that's the person who's really going to be there day in, day out.
Great, thank you so much. Andrea, any thoughts? That mute button can be hard to find sometimes, right? I'm going to unmute you.
Yes, it keeps saying the host has muted me, so it's not letting me unmute myself. Yeah, I would just add to that. Yeah, your principal can be a very powerful ally for you. Obviously, you're going to be the closest with them as they're the principal of your kiddo's school. But I think that in order to make the biggest change for us at Balance, we really want to be as high impact as possible. And when you think about, obviously, you're concerned about what your kids are being served, and I'm sure there are other parents too throughout the school district. So like Michael said, it's great to start with your principal, but also kind of work your way up the system and try and ensure that everybody in your district has the same chance to access healthy foods as your school is going to once you work with your principal to get that change.
Yeah, going off of what Andrea said, I think I was telling you this story yesterday, Renee, that I had a chance to meet the person in charge of school purchasing for all of New York City. And I happened to run into him at this event that I go to once a year. And he now knows me as the guy who's going to come up and ask him about veggie burgers. Because every time I see him, I ask him why they still don't have veggie burgers. Because in New York City schools, every Tuesday is Burger Day. So I'm like, hey, why can't Burger Day feature a veggie burger for all the people that don't eat meat? And he's like, every year it's like, well, we're working on it, and, we test marketed this. And, so we kind of have this check-in now every year. And we talk about other things. And he's a nice guy and we get along very well. But when he sees me come over and I smile at him, he's like, burgers. And that's kind of how every encounter between us starts. But he's honest and open with me, I think, as he can be to just a parent who he's kind of come in contact with. But from that rapport, I've taken information that he's given me and sort of pushed other people to try to push them in other ways. But obviously, the topic is there. Thankfully, I don't know what kind of bureaucracy they're up against that they can't kind of source a veggie burger, which is funny because Andrew, you were talking about how schools just want to order the pre-packaged, pre-made, put together. I'm like, well, you already do that. Can't you order a veggie burger? That's essentially what it is a pre-made thing that's not always entirely healthy, but that's another whole conversation. I would just like to get a veggie burger in the schools to start. But so that's finding out who these people are, I think, and finding out ways to interact with them. New York is so big. It was just, I was at kind of a food event that I ran into him. But finding out who these people are and how you can interact with them. Obviously, do not stalk people, but if there are ways that you intersect with them, because they're people and they're involved in things in their community, and you might be able to foster a relationship with them.
That's a great story. I really love that, and how Michael has gotten to know his the food service director, and that he's now known as the veggie burger guy. That's a great way to kind of make your presence felt while still having a positive relationship with your food service directors and schools officials. Let's go to a few more questions. Here's kind of a similar question. Maria is asking, of the schools that have embraced this, have embraced change, has it been largely driven by students, parents, other staff, or organizations? Michael and Andrea, I'd love to hear from either of you on this, what you've seen.
We're a elementary school, so most things are kind of parent led, because we're parents of kids from kindergarten to 5th grade. And I think among the fifth graders, you do see they're starting to develop those kind of opinions and stuff like that. But it's in our school, it is mostly parent led. But I've heard of, you know, in once you get into middle and high school, kids really start forming their own opinions and can bring a lot of passion to this. But I also do know of elementary kids in other areas have done amazing things, convinced their superintendents to change their school system's food. And so it is possible. I find in our community, it seems to be a lot coming from parents.
And I would say the same for us, you know, if folks are really interested in changing particularly elementary school food, it tends to be a coalition of parents and usually organizations. Parents are busy. It's tough to kind of lead this change alone. But when it comes to more district-wide change, we actually find that having a coalition of parents, students, and, you know, organizations to support them that maybe could provide evidence that supports their claims or something like that is actually usually the most powerful. Obviously, you need to demonstrate that the students are going to want to eat the products. Again, to really prove to the food service director they're not going to lose money. There's not a lot of, you know, they're not taking on too much risk by making the change. So if possible, the broadest coalition is usually the best.
Okay, thank you both for that. There are so many great questions coming through in the chat box, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can, but we've got about a little over 5 minutes left for the Q&A. So let's go to, there are kind of a few questions that are a little bit similar here, so I'm going to try and put them into one question. Let's see. We have Patricia who's saying she tried sharing information with the parent council executive and principal about why it's a good idea to have healthy options available, but they were not convinced by the information. And so she's asking if we have tips about how other ways to convince school officials or to give them kind of information that's easy to digest and to understand. Any thoughts on talking to school officials who might be a little bit reluctant to hear what you have to say?
Yeah, we do that a lot as a public health organization. We pretty much exclusively talk about the health benefits of making these changes. If you want to follow up with me, I'm happy to send some of our resources as well that really focus on the long-term impact of a lot of our dietary habits. Happy to share those with you for sure. Beyond that, you kind of have to keep going up the ladder and finding people who might have even more influence, who could potentially be an ally, you know, like a school board official, maybe if the principal's not listening, you know, maybe some members of the PTA who might be on your side. Again, like we at Balance really focus on organizing as broad a coalition as possible. So getting a lot of parents on your side who care about this. Sometimes it can be easy for these school officials, you know, they're hearing so many things from so many different parties. It can be easy for them to brush off just a meeting with one person. Unfortunate as that is, you all deserve to be heard and prioritized. The more you can show that this is very important to a lot of people, the more likely they really are to listen.
And this, Michael, I'm hoping you could maybe speak. It kind of goes off what Andrew was just talking about. We have another question kind of related from Rebecca Portman. She's saying, speaking of PTA meetings, she's debated on whether it's worth the time to try and present at regional ones. And so she's asking if anyone has done that and whether it's worth the time to speak at PTA meetings.
I'm sorry, you're saying at regular PTA meetings?
At regional PTA meetings.
Oh, I've never seen it happen. I don't go to many regional PTA meetings. I'm mostly just in our school. I think you have to find where you're going to have a welcome audience. I mean, if you start in your school and there are people in your school that are willing to take it to the next level, definitely. I think, yeah, it can be, because again, I think, you know, what Andrea was saying this before, I mean, you have to work in the larger system to affect, it makes it easier for them if they're doing changes at multiple schools as opposed to just one.
Great, thank you very much, Michael and Andrea. Let's see, we are starting to run out of time here, so I'm going to ask one more question. And for all the other questions that we didn't get to today, we have them here, and I'm going to send a response to you via email. So don't worry, Karen, Paul, Scully, Tara, we see you, and we will answer your questions. But the last one we have today is from Melissa, and she's asking, once you are able to get some plant-based options in schools, what do you find the most effective way to market to students? Health, environment, animal welfare, and through what channels?
I know in our school, you know, trying to get it done by peers. We're all about peer learning in our school, and so if the kids can communicate it to other kids, I mean, we have a real system of the older kids kind of helping out the younger kids at lunch, and so I think anytime that you can get the kids interacting with each other, they're definitely going to respond. They're going to respond better, and you know, like a lot of the things, the kind of the most broad attempts to get kids to eat vegetables is linked to the garden. So I would say it's probably the impact is probably sort of environmental, you know, just thinking about the growing things and stuff like that. But and probably not so much about health. I don't think they're pitching health as a reason to taste something. Just the experience, like broadening your mind and connecting it back to this garden that we have in the school.
Yeah, just to add on to that, gardens can be such a great classroom for kids to really learn about why to enjoy vegetables. Also, in our experience, the whole like peer-to-peer learning is also huge. Both for parents and for students. So helping parents helping other parents understand the changes that are happening, and helping students kind of teach each other on why this is a benefit. We definitely recommend not framing it in terms of what they're missing. So I think a lot of times when people hear Meatless Monday, that word meatless really focuses on what's not on the plate. Instead of really talking in an exciting way about what is on the plate and what, you know, something new and exciting, using a lot of kind of creative and descriptive words, you know, like a crispy, spicy, you know, something, you know, like something that makes your mouth water. And oftentimes framing it in terms of like a new cuisine they might not have tried can be really exciting for kids too. It's like a sense of exploration. But the most important thing we found is not framing it in terms of what's lacking, but framing it in terms of like the exciting parts of the dish. And finally, yes, like, so I think in terms of messaging around it, we try to actually minimize how much we talk about the changes, because again, the more you talk about it, the more you can get into the territory of what you're taking away from someone, as opposed to what what new things you're offering. But we definitely see, like youth and children being more motivated by the environmental impact and not so much their long-term health. But you know, things like, you know, this will help you feel more energetic, or maybe you'll feel like you can run farther and track or something like that. You know, finding a way that it's relevant to them and not like, this decreases your long-term risk for heart disease. Kids don't care about that. So just making sure that it's something that's relevant for the audience you're hearing or that you're speaking to is the best way we found.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Andrea and Michael. I think gardens sound like such a great, fun idea and a great way to get kids involved so they can see the results of what they're growing. Thank you so much. And here we have a few to wrap things up and think about what we've talked about today. We have a few key takeaways. As Michael and Andrea have both talked about, they've been teaming up. There's lots of strength in numbers, finding your community, finding people who are like-minded and want the same kind of positive change in their schools, just like you. And next step would be to learn about your school's kitchen. Learn about what they're serving, what they're doing well, what could be improved, if they have a gardening program, learning about what they're already doing and how, and so you can kind of work together, our third tip, with the school to find solutions. And this isn't just working together with the school, this is community members. As Michael mentioned, he worked with local businesses that wanted to help out as well with another community garden. So there are many, you can get creative with this to find solutions together with the entire school community. And so what's next after this? Well, after, if you downloaded our toolkit, if you want to take this a little bit farther, you can reserve a spot for a 30-minute call with me where we can talk a little bit more about the ideas that we've gone over in this webinar. Or if you want to meet more people and find a community online, you can join OMD's Green Team on Facebook. And our Green Team is where people like you are participating in online discussions and asking questions about school lunch campaigns and getting more plant-based options in schools and restaurants around the country. I will also be sharing the answers to the questions that we didn't get to in today's webinar. We'll be sharing that in our Green Team also as well after this webinar. And before we wrap up, I just want to give a special thank you to Michael Walsh in New York for joining us and talking about his experiences with his daughter's school. And I also want to thank our Toolkit partners, the Chef Anne Foundation, Friends of the Earth, and the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, who have been so helpful in creating this content and getting the word across all over the country about plant-based options in schools, and to Balance and Andrea for joining us today to share all of their very valuable experiences working with schools around the country. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being part of the webinar, Michael and Andrea. And if anybody has any questions or needs tips, recipes, or just wants to share their story, please email me at Renee@OMD4the Planet, and we can try to connect you with people in your area, connect you with any of our Toolkit partners or school lunch partners around the country. We want to hear from you, and we are here to help you. So thank you very much for joining us today. The webinar will be made available online if you want to rewatch it, and we will also share it with your friends, and we will also be getting around to answering all of the questions that we did not get to answer during the webinar. So thank you again, and please email me or contact me if you have any questions. Aside from that, thank you for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.